What's going on, everyone? My name is Mr. Rage22 and welcome back to my channel. So as you guys know, Konami just made a huge comeback. They literally went from slot machines to making video games again because they just announced not one, but a bunch of Silent Hill games coming out. And as you guys know, Silent Hill 2 Remake was one of them. Now, the first thing I want to say right off the bat is I am excited for this game, or this remake. I am excited because this is coming from a person who was never really able to really get into the OG Silent Hill games. And yes, this video is being made by someone with eyes that were not on the original games. I never really cared about the original Silent Hill games. I've seen gameplay of them, and I've played a little bit of the OG Silent Hill 2, and I was never really able to get into them. Not because of the story, but because of the gameplay itself. This may piss off a lot of OG Silent Hill fans. You guys are probably neckbeards as well from like the early 2000s, but I don't care. I find the original Silent Hill games very outdated. Extremely outdated, actually. But one thing I want to say right now before I say anything else, I'd like to actually make a quick shout out to Missylation or Michael, I believe that's his real name. Missylation is a huge fan of the OG Silent Hill 2, and I believe he has a full walkthrough on his channel, so definitely go check out his walkthrough of the original Silent Hill 2 if you have never seen it yourself. Maybe you're like me and you never actually got to see it, but here's the thing though. I wanted to get into Silent Hill because the story and, the whole vibe and atmosphere of the game is right up my alley. As you guys know, I'm a huge horror fan, and supernatural or paranormal horror, just otherworldly horror, that's always been my favorite type of horror. Like, I like Resident Evil, sure, but I've always hated the story of Resident Evil because, it's more about, biological horror. And while I do appreciate biological horror because I'm also a fan of games like Left 4 Dead, supernatural horror takes the cake for me because I absolutely love supernatural horror and otherworldly horror, ghosts, demons, vampires, werewolves, all that stuff. So the vibe of Silent Hill is right up my alley. So, I've been wanting to get into the franchise, but I just couldn't. Because, like I said earlier, I feel like the older Silent Hill games are just too outdated. And I've said this before on this channel, but to me, it's mostly the gameplay that matters. That's why I like Resident Evil so much. Like, if Resident Evil didn't have very good gameplay, then I wouldn't be playing those games. But, although I don't really like the story of Resident Evil, it's like, biological horror aspects, like with the whole bioterror thing. Like, if it didn't have such amazing gameplay, I wouldn't be a fan of Resident Evil. I am a fan of Resident Evil because of its gameplay, not its story. So I care more about the gameplay than anything else. But sure, you'll be wondering, like, then why do I want to get into Silent Hill? Because, well, the reason I want to get into Silent Hill is because I think Silent Hill has a fantastic story. Like, honestly, for the first time, Silent Hill's story and the whole atmosphere and vibe and the whole concept of Silent Hill, it's so good that that's actually what got me to want to try and get into the actual franchise. But again, I just couldn't. The gameplay was such a huge obstacle for me because I just couldn't get into the gameplay. And if I can't really enjoy a game's gameplay, then it's going to be extremely hard for me to appreciate literally anything else about that game, including the story. So, although I did really like the story of Silent Hill, and even Silent Hill 2, obviously, I just couldn't get into it. And yes, I have played Silent Hill 2, the OG Silent Hill 2. And I tried to like it just for the sake of the story and even the atmosphere. Like, I absolutely loved the atmosphere. I've always loved the concept of Silent Hill 2 specifically. Just being inside of this creepy town with all this fog everywhere and all this, like, this sense of dread. Like, I've always loved the idea of a haunted town more than just your typical haunted house. So I tried to get into Silent Hill 2's gameplay only for the sake of its atmosphere and its story, but I should have realized that, since it's me we're talking about, I should have realized that it wasn't going to work because, honestly, I couldn't stand the gameplay for Silent Hill 2. I absolutely hated it. I despised it. I was surprised I was able to play that game for longer than an hour before quitting and saying this is the worst game I ever played. Because it is. Like to me, Silent Hill 2 is a terrible game, but a fantastic movie. Like if it was a movie, then I would have probably liked it more. But that's why I'm excited for this remake because you see, you gotta understand something. Silent Hill 2 and a lot of these Silent Hill games in general, all these games came out during a time where, games were different. These days, games are just different. They're better than they were before. You see, the reason why people liked games like Silent Hill and the OG Resident Evil, the reason why you guys liked those games so much back when they first came out is because it was something we've never seen before. And the gameplay was all you had. That was the only that the gameplay was the only thing that was there. There was no other type of gameplay back then. Like Resident Evil's tank controls and so was Silent Hill's tank controls. Like the reason why everyone liked them so much back when they first came out is because those were the only games that were offered. There wasn't any other type of games except for Pokemon and stuff like that. I'm sorry guys, I'm not a boomer, so I don't know what else there was, but in terms of survival horror, my point is, games like Silent Hill 2 and even Resident Evil 2, these games came out during a time where those types of games were good because you've never seen something like that before. Games were just starting to begin. Games was still a new thing back then. So that's why the gameplay was so good back then. That's why people liked the gameplay back then. That's why people didn't have a problem with it. You see, the thing about old versus new is back in those days, the games were more shittier because, they were brand new and they just came out. But these days, the games are better. The games are better because they're more advanced. If you say that someone is still going to like a game like Silent Hill 2 these days when we've played other amazing modern games with modern controls and better gameplay, do you really think that they're actually going to want to play an old ass game like Silent Hill 2? No, we are not, because this is a different generation. And that's the problem with old versus new, because like I just said, back in those days when games just started, that's why people liked them so much, because they were brand new. Games were still a new thing back then. So that's why people didn't look at the gameplay and be like, wow, this gameplay is just really not good, compared to, other games. That's because a lot of the other games had almost the same type of gameplay, tank controls and, you had like the games like Pokemon and stuff like that. And the original Mortal Kombat, all those games they're too outdated. That's why they're called retro games, because they come from a time that's much different from ours. Those games are from a time where games were, just beginning. They're basically elders. They're elderly games because they're too old to be enjoyed these days by a younger generation and a new generation that's more used to modern, more advanced games. So, in my opinion, I think it's great. I think it's fantastic that they're remaking Silent Hill 2 because I feel like this is a fantastic opportunity for me, especially to get into this franchise. Because, like I just said, Silent Hill 2 and the Silent Hill games in general, they're just too outdated for me because the gameplay is too outdated. I didn't grow up in the 90s and the early 2000s where games were just starting. I grew up in a time where games were more advanced and the gameplay was more better and modern. So that's why I just can't really get into Silent Hill 2 because it's just too old for me. I mean, fun fact, the only retro game that I actually like is the original Doom. That's legit the only retro game I actually like. I cannot stand retro games. I feel like I'm playing older games that just don't feel as good as modern games, and I think to myself, why am I playing these old outdated games when I could be playing more modern, fun, advanced games that are actually from my time, games that are more advanced and games that are just better. And I'm not picking on these games, I'm not. I mean, 30 years from now, my favorite games are probably going to be outdated because this generation is just like the one from the previous generation. Everything gets outdated eventually when new things start to come out. maybe even your favorite game. Like, you could have your own favorite game. You could have a game that you think is the best game of all time, and it will probably be outdated in like 30 years or so, because that's how getting old works. New things stay good for a while, but then when newer things come out, the older things just start to fade away, you know? They start to lose their touch compared to the newer games, the more advanced games. And retro games, like, they're a relic from the past, you know? So I don't hate retro games. For anyone who likes retro games, because I know there's still people who actually like retro games, I don't got anything against you or the games you like. I just don't like them personally, and I don't think retro games are good, and that is my own personal opinion. And the reason why I think it's great that Silent Hill 2 specifically is getting a remake is because I wanted to actually like Silent Hill 2, the OG Silent Hill 2, even though it is the type of game that I hate. Because like I just said, I don't like older games. And I still tried to like Silent Hill 2 because I loved the atmosphere and the story that it was trying to tell. I love horror games that like to tell a deeper story because, I don't got the best life personally, so it's easier for me to actually immerse and relate to characters who are in a more deeper horror story. So I really, really tried to actually get into Silent Hill 2's gameplay, and I was already into the type of game it was. I was already into the story, I was into the vibe, I was into the atmosphere. And with this remake, I feel like this is a major, major opportunity for me to finally get something that I was just not able to receive. And that's something that's really important to me. And for anyone who thinks that, Silent Hill 2 is still a masterpiece and is even one of the best games of all time, look at me for an example. I don't like older games. I don't like games that came out during a time where games were just not as advanced as they are now. So for anyone who thinks that Silent Hill 2 is still a masterpiece and it's going to be way better than this modern remake and this potentially better version of the game coming out, if you still think that Silent Hill 2 is going to be a masterpiece and is still going to be better than this one, you're wrong. I'm sorry, but you're wrong, because look at me for an example. Your so-called masterpiece that is Silent Hill 2, I hate it. I can't stand it. I think it's the worst game ever made because of how bad its gameplay is. A game's gameplay is its heart and soul. If I can't enjoy the gameplay, then I'm not going to like the game. Because to me, it's the gameplay that matters over the story. That's why I didn't like Silent Hill 2. See, people probably think Silent Hill 2 is a good game because of its story. Even they probably know how bad the gameplay is, but they still think it's a masterpiece of how good the story is. And that's the thing, though. If you think that a game is good, even though it has terrible gameplay but a good story, you are not a true gamer, because you are missing the point of what a game is. Yes, it's good for a game to have a good story and good characters, but even if it didn't, if the gameplay is good, then that's mostly what matters, because video games were made for fun. People play video games to have fun. Games were made for the purpose of fun, and the only way for that to be is with the gameplay. The gameplay is what makes the game, because the gameplay is what makes it fun, and fun is what a game is supposed to be. So if anyone thinks that a game that has shitty, terrible gameplay is still good and worth your time, even if the story is good, then you're essentially telling people to not play a game, but suffer through it just to watch cutscenes and to experience a narrative? No, that's not what games were made for. I'm sorry, but they weren't. That's why I can't stand games like The Last of Us or Silent Hill 2. I don't play a lot of bad games that have bad gameplay but a good story, because I don't play games like that. I don't play games that have shitty gameplay and a good story. And I can't stand developers like that either, because it seems like the developers were not even trying to make a game. It seems like they were trying to make an interactive movie, and it's a shitty interactive movie because the gameplay is just garbage. And unfortunately, that's just how I see Silent Hill 2. I hated its gameplay. I hated everything about its gameplay. I could not stand it. It might have been one of the worst experiences I ever had. So this remake, I'm happy about it. Honest to God, and to be honest with you guys, because I am nothing but honest on this channel, not afraid to express myself, I am happy about this remake, and for any OG Silent Hill fans, even like those of Missylation, I'm not upset. I don't even think Missylation is upset. I'm pretty sure he's actually happy about it because he made a post, and in that post, he replied to one of my comments talking about how he just wanted a really good Silent Hill 2 remake. And I think both me and Missylation are going to get our wishes because this remake, I think it's going to be awesome. Judging by the trailer and everything that both Konami and Bloober Team has said, I think this remake is going to be great. Like, I'm going to make a bold ass statement right now. I think this remake might just be better than the Resident Evil 2 remake. Because, honestly, this is going to give Silent Hill 2 a chance to be enjoyed by a totally new audience like myself who are unable to enjoy the OG Silent Hill 2. And you know, it's like my reason for not being able to get into Silent Hill 2, that reason is specific to me. I can't get into it because I just don't like the gameplay because it's too old for me. It's too outdated. But not everyone is going to buy a PS2 and spend $50 on an old copy of Silent Hill 2 that may not even work just to experience Silent Hill 2. Not everyone is going to do that. Not everyone wants to go through that. So with this remake, we are not only getting a better version of a great game, but now it is going to be able to reach a more wide open audience that is both a modern audience that could enjoy an older game, but even for people like me will finally be able to experience the wonderfulness of Silent Hill 2, because I'm not going to sit here and say that Silent Hill 2 is a bad game. Yes, it's a bad game, but its story was amazing. And that alone does make it a good concept that just needed to be executed better. And I feel like with this remake, it will be executed better because now the game will be modernized. So it'll have better modernized gameplay and it will most likely have the same story. I doubt that they're going to change the story because Konami knows just how good the story of Silent Hill 2 was. So I doubt that they would actually have Bloober Team do something stupid like rewriting the story or anything like that. I'm pretty sure the only thing that's actually going to be updated is both the graphics and the gameplay. And honestly, that's fine. That's all perfectly fine. It may not have the same atmosphere or the same type of vibe that the OG Silent Hill 2 had, but who cares? Who cares? As long as it still has a fantastic story like the OG had, and as long as the gameplay is better, I think it's fine. I don't got a problem with it. And honestly, about Bloober Team, because we got to talk a little bit about Bloober Team, I am a fan of Bloober Team. I do not hate Bloober Team. I know, you guys are probably pissed. You know, I'm saying that retro games are bad. Now I'm even going as far as to say that Bloober Team is good. I'm not saying Bloober Team is amazing, but they sure as hell ain't as bad as a lot of people say they are. There's this one YouTuber called Devilish Dog Gamer. I think that's his name. He is literally the equivalent of a boomer. Okay, this man is like 40 years old, and he made a video talking about how it's bad, or like he made a rant about how Bloober Team was going to be making Silent Hill, and he made like a rant video about it. He is the equivalent of everything I'm talking about. These boomer gamers, like these gamers who come from like the early 90s or the early 2000s, you people need to realize that your generation is over. Nobody wants your games anymore. Nobody thinks that your older games are good anymore. So for all you boomer gamers out there, nobody cares. Your opinions don't matter, and neither do your old ass games, because this is a different generation. This is a generation that has better than you, so they don't want to accept your crap that fails to be as good as what we have now. So about Bloober Team, I don't think they're really as bad as a lot of people say they are. Games like Observer, especially Observer, I have made 2 videos talking about how much I love that game. And the the Layers of Fear series, especially Layers of Fear 2, I found these games to be very underappreciated. Because I felt like the people that were hating on them were hating on them for the wrong reasons. Bloober Team is a developer that makes psychological horror games. They've said it on their homepage themselves that they do not make games like Resident Evil. Their games are focused more on its psychological horror aspects and its story. And the way it's put like that, you'd think that Bloober Team would be perfect for Silent Hill, because that's how the Silent Hill games used to go. Let's be honest. Konami never cared about Silent Hill's gameplay. That's why the stories had so much love put into them, because the stories had more put into them than the gameplay. So Blooper Team will be a perfect fit for Silent Hill by the looks of it, because Blooper Team have said themselves that their games focus more on the story and the narrative and the psychological horror than the actual gameplay. But games like Layers of Fear and Layers of Fear 2 and Observer, these games were very underappreciated. And specifically for Observer, Observer's story was incredibly deep. It had an incredibly disturbing and downright depressing and dark story that was honestly better than its gameplay, but then of course it had its psychological elements that also made it good. Blooper Team is not as bad as people say they are. I understand that the Medium and especially Blair Witch were shitty games, but one thing you gotta realize is Silent Hill does not belong to Blooper Team. This is not one of their IPs. This is a totally different game that they're working on. All Konami is doing is telling them what to do, and that's all Blooper Team is doing. This game is not being made directly by Blooper Team. Konami is just using Blooper Team to develop it. So, for anyone who thinks that Blooper Team is a bad fit for these games, honestly, I think you're wrong, and I don't agree with you, because I think Blooper Team, I don't think they're as bad as people say they are. Are they capable? Maybe. Will they fail? Maybe. Most likely, maybe not so likely. I don't know. I can't give you a straight answer, but if I had to give you my honest opinion and my honest thoughts, I don't think so. I honestly don't think so, because Blooper Team, not only are they underrated, but they're also very underestimated. People hated Layers of Fear when it first came out. They thought it was a shitty game, but then Blooper Team made Observer, and for those who actually played it, they realized just how good of a game it was compared to Blooper Team's previous game, which was Layers of Fear. So not only is Blooper Team very underrated, but they're underappreciated, but they're also very underestimated. Blooper Team might actually end up making one of the greatest horror game remakes of all time. You never know. You can't really judge Blooper Team before they even showed you the game. There's no demo, there's no beta, there's no gameplay trailer. You gotta give them a chance before you start judging. It's the equivalent of judging a book by its cover instead of actually reading the book. It's the same thing here. You're saying that Blooper Team is a bad fit for Silent Hill 2, and all you've seen for the game is the trailer. Like, come on now, man. Don't be so judgmental. Give them a chance. If the remake does end up not being very good, or just ends up being downright bad, which I doubt, then you guys can come back to this video and trash talk me all you want. You know, I'm open for criticism. But if it actually ends up being good and I called it, then you guys owe me a goddamn apology, because you people who are judging Blooper Team and assuming that they're going to fuck up this remake, that's an insult to people like me. That's a direct insult to people like me, because I need this remake. I need this remake to play Silent Hill 2, because I want to play Silent Hill 2, but I am not going to play the OG version because I think it sucks. So for those who think that this remake is going to be bad when it hasn't even come out yet, I find that insulting. So if this remake ends up being good, you guys owe me an apology. For anyone who hates on Blooper Team, and for anyone who did not have enough faith in Blooper Team to make a good Silent Hill 2 remake, you guys owe me an apology. That may sound entitled, but to me, it's not. So anyways, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this review. Like I said, if it ends up being bad, say what you want. Mr. Rage, you're a piece of shit. You were wrong, and you like shitty developers on Blooper Team. Say what you want, but like, I don't want to say I told you so, but when it does end up being good, I want my apology. I want my apology, and I want a PS5 so I can play this shit. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think, or not review, but this discussion. Let me know what you think about, Silent Hill 2 remake. Honestly, I'm not really excited about anything else besides the remake, because Konami also announced a bunch of other Silent Hill games. I'm not sure if these games were already in development before they were announced, or if if they just now started developing them. But all these Silent Hill games coming at once, honestly, I really hope Silent Hill 2 remake had more love and care put into it than these others, because I don't think these other Silent Hill games are going to be good, except for the remake, Silent Hill 2 remake. So That's another bold statement. Who knows? Maybe they'll end up being better than Silent Hill 2 remake. Who knows? You know, I can't assume all this shit. All I could do is just predict and assume. So, anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this discussion video. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to me blabber. I really hope you enjoyed. And yeah, be sure to like, share, comment, and please share this video. I would really appreciate it. And yeah. Anyways, this was Mr. Rage 22, and I will see you guys in the next video. And yeah, peace out, guys, and have a good one. This was Mr. Rage signing off. Bye-bye, guys, and happy Halloween.